Providing a dose of rationality, critical thinking, and skepticism from a conservative atheist perspective, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast. Every week, your host will bring you news of note and commentary on topics of interest in hopes of sparking intelligent discussion on important issues of the day. It's not pretty, it's probably not safe for work, but we tell it like it is and offer no quarter to the credulous, the gullible, or the downright stupid. It's not for the easily offended or for the religiously or liberally minded, but it is about 90 minutes of secular conservative entertainment. So let's get right to the show. Another week, another 90 minutes of critical thinking, skepticism, and general head shaking at the irrational world around us. Yes, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast, and today we take on the gay marriage issue of 4 stories of absurdity. Then we have a nice, peaceful palate cleanser as we talk about one of Japan's ridiculous religious cults. Stick around. This one ought to be good. So how you doing?
I am doing fine. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, except for I just had a bird try to commit suicide, so I've been dealing with stupidity.
How did your bird commit suicide?
Oh, the bird has been around ceiling fans for about 4 or 5 years. They know enough not to get close to them until today. Flew right into it and into a exploding cloud of feathers. The bird's fine, kind of traumatized.
Did you make the bird watch a televangelist again?
No.
Okay,
it's just dumb, and I just had to clean the bird up, and stupid birds are stupid. What do you want?
There is a reason why they have bird strikes.
That was a bird strike.
Yes. Well, out here nothing's happening, except it's getting a little hot. People out of California would be surprised that, yes, indeed, California does occasionally have hot weather.
Yeah. The problem isn't the hot weather. The problem is Monday, Tuesday, we're not hot. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are over 90 degrees. It just keeps going up and down, and that makes people sick, and it sucks.
Yes, it does. And then out here, of course, the problem is that sometimes when it gets cold, that's when you leave stuff outside. I know some of my roommates have plants that it's making it a little difficult to tell, okay, when to leave it outside, when to bring it in and protect it. But that is the lovely changes of weather in the 21st century.
Well, it's not like you're allowed to water the plants anymore anyway.
This is true, although potted plants we water with a watering can. We still have somebody down the street who hasn't gotten the message yet, and they water their plants like 3 hours a day with sprinkles and rivulets running down the road. I think they are going to be unhappy at the bill they're getting.
Yeah, well, I just think it's stupid that California's their new motto is like brown is the new green. Meaning, you're supposed to let everything die.
Which, the problem I always have had with California is that, California used to have good plants, good buildings during the Spanish era. If you take a look at Spanish-style buildings, they work good in the summer, they work good in the winter. If you look at a lot of Spanish-style gardens, they're full of plants that don't need a lot of water. And yet, then around the 60s, everybody decided that they wanted New England plants and New England houses.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, the whole thing is, they had a law, and they still have a law in California that says you absolutely must water your plants. You cannot have a brown lawn. And now they've had to go back and issue an update. I mean, they haven't changed the law or anything. They just said, well, we're just not going to enforce it for a while. And now you get punished if you water your lawn. It's getting ridiculous.
And of course the problem is if they say we're not going to enforce it, then you're faced with the problem, well, that's very wonderful, but since you haven't changed the law, you're dependent on them never turning around and saying, well, we're enforcing it this Friday. Because they can't always turn around and say that, okay, we're starting to enforce the law, since the law itself is not off the books.
Right.
And to be blunt, the law itself is not anything that's going to get declared unconstitutional. So, that is a problem. If you're going to do this, you need to codify something into law so people have confidence that they're not going to suddenly find out that, oops, sorry.
But before we get going, I just had to bring this up because it's really, really, really stupid and a complete indictment of the absurdity of the far political left. So, over on my geeky blog, I had to explain to the social justice wingnuts who are whining about the acceptance gap with female Thor. I had to sit down and explain that nobody gives a damn if the character in the comic book is female right now. most comic fans, they're unhappy that they're calling her Thor. Thor is a proper name of a specific character. It isn't a title. I laid out my whole case of the only time we ever call somebody else Thor is when, well, the spirit of Thor has been invested in this character, etc. That's not the case in this specific instance. That's why people are mad. So I had this one imbecile show up who clearly didn't even read the article. He was just ranting and raving and calling names based on the title of the article. He's called me a racist and a sexist and a misogynist and all this other stupid bullshit. So I keep trying to steer him back into something remotely resembling reality, but he's too busy jumping sharks to be reasoned with. I finally had to just ban this guy because he was just being a complete prick. And what the fuck is wrong with these people? I mean, it makes me want to punch them in their stupid, immature hipster faces. What is wrong?
I don't know. I'm actually surprised there is a female Thor. I did not know that until I just heard this. The DC's doing something different. I mean, not DC, but Marvel's doing something different, or?
Well, they did last summer. It's been going on for about 9 months.
And thus we know why don't come to Charles to ask him about what's happening among the big two in comics, because, this was actually the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on, we've both been geeks forever. I mean, we met more than 30 years ago because we were part of the same gaming group.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have much of a problem with it either way. I mean, I would be more concerned about how the character's portrayed. I mean, that's, as long as Thor is somebody who you do not want to get angry at you, regardless of sex, race, or whatever, it works for me.
Yeah, but these people don't seem to be able to stay on subject. It's really ridiculous because I kept going, okay, here is why I'm making this argument. This is specifically why people have a problem with this. And he keeps turning around and just running for the hills. It's like he kept bringing up the fact that Marvel Studios could do anything they want with the characters. Like, in his words, they could cast Katie Sackhoff as Thor if Chris Hemsworth decided he wanted to step down. No, nowhere did I say anything about this at all. I've never disagreed with that in the slightest. They can do what the fuck they want with their characters. Doesn't matter. Not on topic. Has nothing to do with what I said. I mean, holy shit. Come on, Porkins. Stay on target. But these people can't do that. These people, they've got their little narrative and they run right back to it no matter what anybody else says.
Well, I think it's a problem, it's across the political spectrum. It's just that unfortunately the internet has created a large number of people who don't want a discussion, they want a soapbox. They aren't, the reason they keep running back to where they want to go is they're not interested in having any kind of discussion, debate. They want to tell people what's right and be told then, oh, well, you're obviously correct. And, this is a problem that really hits because the internet is, uniquely designed for this kind of discourse.
Right. Well, this isn't really discourse. This is just a bunch of ranting and raving.
Screaming at each other like angry, angry rhinos. It's unfortunate because you suddenly run into, and this is a problem I have with a lot of bulletin boards, is that you run into a case of either it's impossible to have a conversation because people just are not interested in doing so, or in some cases you have a board that bans everybody with a differing opinion. There's a few boards I generally go to that don't do that, but it's a very difficult job for the moderators to try to hit the sweet spot between the two.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of them don't even try.
Right.
They let the people who want to rant, and they don't hold anybody accountable. There was one religious forum that I occasionally go to, although it's really kind of pointless anymore, where they actually had a rule that said everybody, without regard to their position, must present evidence to support their claims. And the religious fucking freaked out and went screaming around like the sky was falling. And they finally had to make an exception for religion because the religious have no evidence to present.
Well, yeah, the problem is, of course, is that, for one thing, by definition, faith doesn't give you evidence to present, but let's face it, that is a problem especially if you start getting into the religious right and you start getting into the earth is 6,000 years old. Sorry, no. The only way the earth could be 6,000 years old is if God exists and God is a dick and God wants everybody to go to hell because he's running around faking evidence.
Yeah, but they were going, because they'd have the religious just making the most absurd, ridiculous claims. And then the rest of us who were going, well, what the hell? If they can get away with so can we. We'd come by and make absurd, ridiculous claims back, and then we'd get held accountable for not presenting evidence, and they'd be completely ignored. It ultimately became just a complete waste of time to try to debate with anybody there, because the religious get away with murder, and everybody else is held to these rules that are proper for a debate, but these people don't know how to debate.
No. Well, I mean, the problem is that if you remember, I forget where it was. I think it was either Bob Jones University or Liberty University. Where their textbooks, their science textbooks will come out and say, by the way, if anything in this textbook contradicts the Bible, it's wrong. So, you have a system of education that from the very first principle states that there are propositions that are immune to cross-examination. You must accept them as fact. End of argument, close down the board. And you can't debate based on that. It's impossible.
Yeah, but they don't care about debate. I'm actually working on some things right now on how ridiculous the whole idea of religious debate really is.
The problem is, of course, I mean, like, for instance, I was in became rather acrimonious, between a rabbi and some of the religious right. And the rabbi, of course, was arguing the position of Judaism, which is most of the tales in the Old Testament, the Torah, are precisely that. They're allegories, they're tales, they're stories. They're not intended to be taken as, actual events that happened. And the people he was talking to, they left one hole in the roof on the way up and another one on the way down. Because they were just not at all prepared to even think about the idea that these could be allegories.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just tends to be the way religion works.
Yeah.
As we will see as we go on today.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to bring up before we get into the news, I did hear from one of our friends in Korea who has already said he wants to be on the show, but right now he's going through some problems. His father has cancer, and they're working on that. So, just wanted to let you know we're pulling for you, and the door's open anytime you have the ability to come on. We'll make sure we work it out to get you on the air, okay? Well, do we have anything else?
No, I think we should start in with this really odd article. This is just the craziest strong.
Yeah. All right, well then let's do the news.
And now the news.
I just think we need to be realistic about what we're up against here, which is to accomplish something that I don't think, Matt, you can verify it, but it has almost never been done, especially when you have a politically correct issue that's reached the level of intensity that this one has. They talk about a civil war. We could have another one over this.
Because this is the week that the Supreme Court is going to visit the gay marriage issue, we decided to do an entire news segment on stories related to gay marriage. Now, if the writing isn't on the wall for anti-gay marriage advocates, some are starting to suggest that if the Supreme Court legalizes it nationwide, there just might be a nasty uprising among the far religious right. At the center of this are people like Focus on the Family founder James Dobson, who wants every one of the 37 states that have already legalized gay marriage to push for constitutional amendments banning it again. He's talking about fundamentalist Christians engaging in another civil war if gays are allowed to have gay rights.
It didn't work out too well for him when they were having the civil war over slavery. I just think that Mr. Dobson needs to remember that fact. Didn't really play out well. Talked to a nice gentleman named Sherman.
Yeah, well, on the one hand, no, I don't want to see a civil war. But on the other hand, we all know that there just aren't enough fundies out there to make a significant difference.
No.
And there's part of me that wouldn't mind seeing them all take up arms, being declared domestic terrorists, and have them all gunned down in the streets, just so we can get rid of these idiots. The fact is, these people have become a significant impediment to social advancement. It would end so many problems in the U.S., such as the anti-abortion protesting, creationism in the schools, etc., etc. Maybe we ought to let them be stupid so we just get rid of them all.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at this idiocy, I mean, it really is, because seriously, I don't know about you. I've never seen anybody attacked and dragged off by to the gay conversion camps, as they like to talk about, because these are also the people that talk about the special camps where you'll be turned gay. It's always the other way around. You almost never hear about, a homosexual individual beating somebody else up. It's usually them getting beaten up, not by one guy, of course, by 6 or 7 people, showing the Christian love, which we have all come to enjoy. And so this fear is just horrific prejudice. Yeah. I would like, it wouldn't even rise to the level of domestic terrorism. They would come up, the cops would come up, take them to prison. I mean, I wouldn't even dignify them with political terrorism.
Yeah, but you gotta remember, and this is just like we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, these people, they've got nothing. They really have nothing. And they're not even concerned that they have nothing. They have these ridiculous beliefs that are completely unchallengeable. They couldn't care less, and they're just going to run around telling everybody how right they are without having a slightest bit of evidence to prove that they're right. And
it's like the comparison between Nazi Germany. I mean, guys, sorry, no, you're wrong. It was not a good time to be a homosexual in Nazi Germany. There were some at the higher levels who could protect themselves because they were higher levels of the Reich's government. I mean, surprise, surprise, the Nazis were hypocrites. I mean, seriously, is anyone surprised that a monstrous regime like the Third Reich were also a bunch of hypocrites? But, most homosexuals in Germany did not exactly celebrate, hey, good times are here. Our brothers in the Third Reich have taken the country over. They were too busy being exterminated in the various death camps.
Right.
To compare, and the Jim Crow area, which of course I would point out was heavily supported by many of the same churches that are currently opposing gay marriage. They should know a great deal about Jim Crow because they provided a lot of the religious and cultural backing for Jim Crow. It's offensive. It's like a screaming child who says that you're Adolf Hitler because you're not giving her an extra scoop of ice cream before bed.
Right, exactly. I mean, as much as I hate the term being on the wrong side of history, since I see it coming far more from the left, there's really no other way to describe these religious nutballs. It's clear they've already lost. Even if the Supreme Court rules against national gay marriage, it's only a matter of time before virtually every state legalizes it, and even if there are a couple that refuse, they'll become entirely irrelevant in the scheme of things. It doesn't matter, guys. You lost. Stop ranting and raving, grow the fuck up, and stop being idiots.
And, accept the fact that, one thing I want to point out is when gay marriage first started becoming a thing in America, when the very first judge struck it down, you read the news, they were proclaiming that those states was going to become Sodom and Gomorrah. Cats and dogs living in sin, just the whole 9 yards. And no, those states, pretty much the only people in those states who really noticed a big difference were the people who could marry and bridal shops that had a bit more business. That was it. There was no sudden explosion of evil lifestyles. There was no explosion of criminality or immorality. It did nothing.
Right, but you got to remember that most of the states that are still outlawing gay marriage, those are usually the ones that have all these problems. They're the ones with the highest incidence of welfare. They're the ones with the highest prison populations. They're the messes.
Right. And this is the fact. This is honestly the hidden fact that if you look at the Bible Belt, if you look at the place a lot of these people come from and they proclaim this is the most moral part of America, it leads the country in every category of crime. These places, higher rates of drug addiction, higher rates of underage sex, higher rates of children born out of wedlock, and it's been like that forever. I mean, even back in the antebellum era, the Deep South, what would become the Bible Belts in later years, they completely blew the North out of the water when it came to murder rates. And given the fact that cities normally have higher murder rates than rural areas, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And they are continuing to do this. And, really seriously, when I look at this, the good news is I see people terrorized because they are you're right, they are on the wrong side of history. I think recent surveys, something like 50 or 60% of Americans now feel that gay marriage should be a constitutional right.
Yeah, I think that number was 57% last I looked.
57%. Yeah, I mean, so you're talking to an absolute majority of Americans now agreeing with it. That's probably only going to go up because most people look at this and they say, what does it do to me? Well, if I happen to be homosexual, it gives me a chance to be married to somebody, to enjoy a huge number of rights that is guaranteed by law. If I am not gay, if I am not homosexual, it does nothing to me. You know, it doesn't even hurt me tax-wise, because generally you can get more, you can often get more discounts if you stay single than if you're actually married. So it doesn't even hurt there. I mean, it does nothing to harm anyone who is not interested in this.
Right.
And most people know that. I mean, you know, for instance, just the people on the blog or listening to the podcast don't know this, but sometimes you'll have people say, well, you don't need to be married. And the fact of the matter is yes, you do need to be married. If your partner should happen to become ill and become incapacitated in a hospital, there is no other legal relationship that just automatically gives you the right to have some input into their care and see them. Nothing else. You can't sign a prenuptial agreement. You can't sign a contract. You can't have him sign a power of attorney. All of those are open to dispute. All of those can see you blocked if the hospital doesn't want to risk it. Marriage is what gets you in that door.
Right. And I mean, I think sometime we should probably talk about the pros and cons of marriage. I mean, not only from this standpoint, but like the libertarians and the state should have nothing to do with marriage kind of crap. But I think that's probably a good discussion that we need to have at some point in time.
Yeah. Well, and it is an interesting thing. It is a case where, you know, marriage is still important because of so many rights that circulate around it. And of course the fact that given that many gay people are on the outs with their family. I mean, it's a sad fact, but there are many people have been driven out of their families. You don't want to let a hostile family then have access to, because they can say, well, he's not married to his partner, but we still have that legal relationship, you know, being his parents.
Right. And seriously, I'm hoping this might be just the thing that breaks the religious right and the GOP. As long as this is a serious plank in their platform, the GOP is never going to win another presidential election. Let's be honest. Not going to happen. But they want to win. And they're preaching to an ever-shrinking fan base that no longer cares about the hate-centric positions of the Republican Party. I'm really hoping that once the Supreme Court makes the only decision I can really think that they can make, that maybe the GOP and the Tea Party just kind of divide into two separate parties, and all the intelligent people go on to be part of the GOP, and all the religious whining nut bars stay with the Tea Party, and, you know, we just kind of go from there.
To be honest, that is in the long term, because a GOP that is progressive or neutral on social issues, tries to go for small government, business-friendly policies on economic issues, we'll leave what they want to do foreign policy out right now, could start to challenge the Democratic Party. Because, you know, I vote Democratic for a lot of things, mainly because of the social issues. I know a lot of people who vote Democratic because they are opposed to the Republican Party's positions on everything from gay marriage to religion and government, things like that. A party that loses that, a party that simply says, no, we are now a small business, small regulation party, has the possibility of pulling a lot of people from the Democratic Party who were largely not so much going to the Democratic Party as the Republicans pushed them out of the Republican Party.
Right. I mean, it would be nice if we could actually get the Republican Party pretending to be conservative again. I mean, that's something we haven't had in this country for 50 years.
And to be honest, I know more than a few Democrats that would be happy about that, because they feel the Democratic Party has been pulled to the right by the number of people coming in who are more conservative than they would be otherwise, but they're shoved out of the Republican Party. And, you know, that is true. When you say the Democrats are to the left, if you talk that to a typical European, they look at you like you just grew a third eye. And it would be an interesting case to start seeing more of a difference, more of a choice in who you can vote for, rather than the person you don't like and the giggling crazy man. I mean, you know, because seriously, right now, for a lot of Americans, it's, do we want to vote for a crazy party, or do we want to vote for a party that okay, well, they're acceptable. And that is actually harming our democracy and our republic in a very real sense.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we really have a choice between two crazy parties. They're just crazy in different ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, and of course, the other problem is because they know that neither party really, there's not much of a motivation to change if you know people will vote for you regardless.
Right. Well, we know that we need massive political change in this country, and nobody wants that.
No.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get to the next story. Here we go again, yeah. It started out with a bakery that refused to make a cake for a gay wedding, and it seems the world has gone crazy with more and more businesses refusing to do business with homosexuals on religious grounds. Now we have a bakery in Oregon, which was fined for their discriminatory position and charged a hefty fine. They tried to go to GoFundMe for the money, but GoFundMe shut them down. And now the bakery is claiming that Satan is responsible for the debacle and is trying to find another way to pay the $135,000 fine. Or they could just stop being pricks, but we all know that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Satan dislikes your bakery. What can I say? You should not have just given him 5 donuts when he purchased a half a dozen donuts. This is a case that I'm not entirely certain. It sounds like from the story is what it is that probably what GoFundMe has is law saying you can't use this to pay off legal debts. It makes sense. They're probably afraid of somehow maybe being considered a party to the legal case. But it's common. But the whole thing with Satan, again, this just gets back to the fact that a lot of the highly religious people, religious right especially, they see Satan as an active presence in the world. He's running around doing stuff. You lose your sock, it's Satan. Your car gets wrecked, it's Satan. It's actually a really easy excuse for just about everything that goes wrong in your life.
Oh, of course. But let's be honest, most of these businesses, they're only pulling this public anti-gay crap because they think it'll be a windfall. That pizza place that we talked about last week, they closed down entirely because they got a shit ton of money from religious zealots. It's all about money. If it wasn't, this wouldn't have happened as soon as that first bakery got their first big check.
Yeah, well, they also feel that it's going to, benefit them because people will then know like you said, money and popularity. It's unfortunate. I mean, it's an attempt to also create the idea that you're somehow being persecuted.
Oh, and these people all have a massive persecution complex.
Yeah, and, this is a factor. I mean, again, much like the Darling gentleman in the 1960s and 70s who got tremendously upset when the court said that, okay, well, you're not allowed to not let blacks sit and eat at your diner. Sorry, not going to happen. And there was a tremendous explosion of we are now being persecuted, and surprise, surprise, when it all boiled down, not much happened. This is, I'm assuming, fine's probably based on, it says it's discriminatory, but I'm assuming like a lot of things it's based maybe on the Commerce Clause, I'm not certain. It's a local state law, so I'm not entirely certain how it works. But fundamentally the thing goes is that you're not generally allowed to discriminate against people if they are under a protected class. So I'm assuming Oregon has declared homosexuals to be a protected class in the state.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as much as I don't want to be overly authoritarian, let's be honest, we already have a guarantee in the Constitution that everyone is quote unquote created equal and therefore has equal representation under the law. We've got civil rights laws in place that guarantee that everybody must be treated equally. It's been established that we have a secular government. The religious deserve no more special representation or special treatment than anyone else. But like you said last week, if some random Aztec warrior decides they want to go out and rip somebody's heart out of their chest, we don't allow them to do that. So why is it that Christianity gets special treatment that everybody else doesn't get?
And I think that there was a more amusing case that actually happened back. A guy was making a place called Bible Land, and he didn't have any, permits whatsoever, so it could also be called Death Trap Land. And when the sheriff came out, he got into an argument, and finally the sheriff, who also went to church, lost his temper, and it said, Jesus said, render unto God what is God's, and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and Caesar wants a damn building permit. And that's largely how it's been understood, is that you must obey the secular authorities. Again, it's actually said in the Bible.
But they don't. That's the thing. They don't want to have anything to do with secular law where they disagree with it. Now, if anybody else does something that harms them or their interests, they scream up and down, go crazy that secular law has to apply to everybody except them.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, well, for one thing, I mean, especially I would have to say, guys, if you're religious, don't come across like a whining 5-year-old. It's really a case of this was apparently just wanting to get bake the cake. It is a financial transaction. If you are a business, you have to abide by a lot of rules. You know, you have to abide by rules regarding paying taxes. Your bank. I'm wondering if these people vetted their bank to see if they conform to the biblical prohibition on usury.
Of course not.
Yeah, of course not. So, it gets to the problem is that if you start cherry picking like this, it kind of becomes odd, especially when you're cherry picking for things that the Bible never actually talks about.
Yeah, well, my whole thing is we issue business licenses to businesses, and part of the requirement for having a business license is following applicable state and federal laws. You don't get to just pick and choose what you want to do. Now, if you don't want to follow those laws, fine. Turn in your damn business license.
And of course those laws protect them because, if the person came walking in with a parade of people looking like they were at a burlesque show, then you have a full right to decline service. But that's not because they're gay, that's because they're walking in, conducting acts which impact your ability to conduct your business. This was a case where it was clearly and obviously, designed as, standing against the gay agenda. And like I said, in this case, the gay agenda is buying a wedding cake, which strikes me as not exactly the kind of thing of which the new Third Reich is going to be built of, to refer to the previous story.
Yeah, and so many of these cases are just ridiculous. I mean, I won't sell you pizza, I won't sell you shoes, I won't, guys, do the damn business that you are in business to do. What these other people believe or think or do in the privacy of their bedrooms has no impact whatsoever on your ability to do business. You're not out there going, well, I'm going to facilitate gay sex. No, you're baking a cake. The same thing you did yesterday, the same thing you did last week, and the same thing you might do tomorrow if you just don't go out of business because everybody stops going to your damn store.
Right, and of course this not providing people with services has long been a tool to drive people out of the community, which is another reason the government kind of frowns on it. This is a case where I am finding myself very, very unable to raise much sympathy for these people.
Oh, I have no sympathy.
To also mention the fact that they went out of their way to proclaim, hey, we're not doing this for that reason. So.
Oh, I'm willing to bet that they were in bad financial straits where they weren't really doing a lot of business anyway. And maybe that had to do with their religion and maybe it didn't. But I'm willing to bet that they saw this as a financial windfall. Hey, let's go out and do something outrageous and then proclaim Christian discrimination so that we get a lot of people sending us money.
Yeah. It's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens to them now that the GoFundMe is done. I mean, also for people wondering, usually the fines, when you hear a big-ass number as a fine, quite often the actual fine you end up paying is nothing like that.
So, I'm sure these people ended up with a lot of money in their pocket.
So it's difficult to tell what exactly the fine is. I didn't have a chance to look at the actual reports. Another point is just accept the fact that the normal media, when they report on legal questions, their reports are always horrible and you won't go wrong if you go into it with those assumptions.
Right.
So.
Well then, do you want to jump into a couple stories?
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of your stories.
Well, right now we're looking at probably one of the biggest, court cases coming up, since some of the major, civil rights cases of the 1950s and 60s, which is going to define whether or not gay marriage is a constitutional right in the United States, whether it's a fundamental right. And right now people are a little worried. I mean, on the one hand, we have some good signs in that, of course, there have been numerous appellate cases that the court has let pass. Appellate courts ruled that yes, indeed, gay marriage is a constitutional right. You have the right to marry. It goes up to the Supreme Court. The court didn't hear it. Now, they waited until this case came up where the court decided against gay marriage, but there's a belief that so many people have been married at this point, the court is going to be unwilling to overturn a decision that's already in play in a good chunk of the United States.
Right. Well, the problem isn't necessarily that there's a lot of people married. It's that they've got so many states who have legalized gay marriage, and there's only a couple left, and they're all pushing for it too. There's a point at which time they have to go, well, we can't just overrule everybody.
Yeah, well, and you got the problem. I mean, the other factor is that, one of the issues we're looking at here, of course, is the question of what happens if the court says that gay marriage is not a right. And that's just going to lead to all kinds of chaos across the United States. I mean, you've got got private and public organizations that have already started making accommodations. If they have to turn around again, it's going to be a problem. And then there's also the fact that, Roberts is fairly young. I mean, he's going to be around for a while now. And some people wonder, does Roberts really want to make a decision, be the swing vote in a case that could go down in history books next to Dred Scott? Because, Dred Scott was a case where Justice Taney, made a ruling that, could be considered legally to be correct, but, it's practically become shorthand for horrible Supreme Court case.
Yeah, but I still find it really sad that any of the Supremes are still employed, considering that they're all violating their oath and job description. Court cases are not supposed to be determined on the justice's personal beliefs and opinions. They are not supposed to be considered because a young justice doesn't want to look bad. They're supposed to be decided based on the Constitution and nothing but the Constitution.
True, but unfortunately, let's face it, that's a problem, that's a human problem. That's not even so much of a court problem. And the other issue might be is that trying to decide if you personally don't like this, it can be difficult to separate out personal and professional feelings, especially when you consider that there is not a great deal of, the Constitution says nothing about this. You can't point to any part of the Constitution.
Not that says anything specifically, but as I said before, there are parts of the Constitution which are undeniable. Everyone is created equal. Everyone has equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment, this is an open and shut slam dunk. I don't see how they can possibly decide anything but allowing gay marriage. And the only reason they punted back in 2013 was because there weren't enough contentious states involved. Right. Now we got 37 states allowing it, up from 19 in 2013. It makes no sense at all under any kind of constitutional basis, except for a bunch of religious fucks running around going, we're right, we're right, we're right, fuck you. If the Supremes don't make that decision, fuck the Supremes.
One argument is that they could say, this belongs with the states. I disagree. Because to be honest, marriage is a choice that has such important issues that it should be decided on a national basis, especially for something like this. But that is one area where they could try to punt it back to the states. My personal thought is
before you go on, if they were going to do that, why would they take the case at all? Because that's the status of the cases before they even rule.
Well, they've got the various appellate districts that have ruled for gay marriage. I mean, but the problem I would have is if you were going to do that, the time to do that was when the very first case came up for appeal to the Supreme Court. Not now when we have 37 states. The problem is by waiting as long as they have to overturn and then say, okay, there is no federal right to gay marriage. Like I said, it causes a huge amount of problems. And it would seem more logical that the court, because let's face it, the court's membership really hasn't changed since those first cases came up. So they should have done it back then if they were going to do it at all. I am hoping, and, unfortunately people are always misinterpreting the court, so I'm not going to say I'm certain. I am hoping what happens is that Roberts and the, other justices, I'm fairly certain that Thomas, Alito, and Scalia are probably going to vote against it. I would be surprised if Thomas and Scalia did not vote against it. Not too certain about the other, but, the fact of the matter is that I am hoping that we get at least a 6-3 decision for this, to put this issue to bed. That's another thing. That's another reason I would love to see the Supreme Court rule for this, is it just puts the issue to bed.
But it doesn't. That's the problem. No matter how they rule. Unless they rule that gay marriage is completely illegal in every state, no matter what, under all conditions, they cannot make their own constitutional amendments to allow it. It's just a complete dead issue. The religious are not going to let this lie.
Oh, the religious are going to, the religious right that opposes gay marriage isn't going to let this lie. But if they say that, okay, well, the right to marriage extends to homosexuals, short of a constitutional amendment, a federal amendment, which you're not going to get, a lot of states are going to pass, constitutional amendments if they can get them in, and it's going to last right up until you get to the nearest federal judge who strikes it down based on the supremacy clause. So the thing is, if they rule for gay marriage, in real terms, the issue's over. And also the thing is that if they do that, you'll see a lot of screaming. I'm sorry, megachurch pundits, you're not going to see a revolt. As people, my personal belief is increasingly people are once again, they're going to wait for the chaos and the debauchery and the horror, and then they're going to suddenly notice that, it doesn't occur. This issue will go away.
Yeah.
I'm certain they'll find another issue to get upset about.
I don't think it's going to go away necessarily. I mean, let's face it, these people are still bitching about abortion, and that's been, 40 years?
Well, abortion is actually because not only are they bitching about abortion, they have been very successful in effectively eliminating the right to abortion in a large portion of the United States. I mean, there are states out there where you have a right to abortion if you can travel 200 miles, if you can make an appointment 6 weeks in advance, if you can sit through 15 different, essentially shaming sessions. For anyone who does not have at least middle class wealth, they have managed to make it essentially unavailable in these states. And that is an area where I feel the Supreme Court has dropped the ball beyond belief, in which they've essentially said that so long as it's technically available, you're not moving against Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, but you got to remember that a large portion of the Supreme Court, they don't give a shit one about the Constitution. They only care about their stupid religious beliefs.
Yeah, well, that is an issue that, especially in abortion, that has been a serious issue. Especially, and let's be blunt. One of the problems, of course, is that abortion would not be illegal under biblical terms, because we actually have biblical, verses where they talk about the child and the mother, and it is clearly stated the child is of less value than the mother.
Yeah, but you don't think these people care about that, do you?
No. But, no, so I'm going to put my bet on they are going to rule. I will bet for a 6-3 for gay marriage. I am hoping it's not a 5-4, because a 5-4 means it really wouldn't be put to bed, because people would realize they just need one swing vote to get the court to revisit it.
Yeah.
So I would love to see a 9-0, but that's not going to happen.
Oh, of course not, because like we said, Thomas and Scalia and those people, there is no way in hell, even if it said in the Constitution gay marriage is perfectly fine, they would still find that gay marriage wasn't fine.
Let's just play that if Roberts can figure out a way to get a 9-0 consensus that approves gay marriage, he truly deserved the job of Chief Justice. Because that would be really impressive, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm betting for a 6-3.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And that's fine. As long as it goes through, I don't really care what the numbers are. It doesn't really matter. And after a couple of years, there's going to be so much case law built up around it that going back and overturning it, just like Roe v. Wade, it's virtually impossible. You'll never do it.
And of course, now if we're wrong and it doesn't happen the way we want, I probably won't be able to say anything like this, because people probably don't want to listen to a podcast that starts out screaming vulgarities and ends up with me screaming vulgarities.
I don't know, that might be funny.
Yeah, that might be, just how much foul language can Charles say before the computer explodes. But I'm hoping that I won't have to do that. I do not want to live through a Dred Scott.
Yeah, well, then again, I thought that about a lot of things, and they've made some really awful, stupid decisions. Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
And,
And, so hopefully this will not be a stupid decision.
Hoping for 6-3.
Hoping for 6-3.
Well, so
we'll accept 5-4, but really.
I'll accept anything that wins.
Yeah.
I'm not picky. I'll take anything that, makes this shit go away in the courts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and finish up with your last story.
Okay. The question of what's going to happen, there's another factor here. What happens in 2016? We're coming up to a vote. It's likely going to be not as lopsided as the last election was, because, of course, nobody is currently having the incumbency advantage. And the Supreme Court is almost certainly going to drop this decision into the middle of the 2016 presidential race. There's a couple of issues here. First of all, for the Republicans, some of the Republican strategists do want to see a decision. They want to see this issue off the table, because seriously, undecided voters tend to be turned off by people screaming about, death camps and the Great Revolution and, Todd Aiken and his numerous comments. And so they want something that will take this off the plate. On the other hand, it's not going to get taken off the plate by a Supreme Court decision, because if the court decides for gay marriage, the religious conservatives in the Republican Party are going to go through the roof. They are probably going to demand that absolutely every candidate running endorses a constitutional amendment.
Right, which they will never have happen. And as I was saying before, it probably is going to be better to see the Tea Party split off entirely from the Republicans, so that you can have the Nutty Religious Party, and then you can have the more or less conservative party. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I can always dream. They're never going to get anybody to win the presidency again, so long as they keep pushing this hyper-religious, hate-based position.
Right, and like Mike Huckabee, he threatened to leave the GOP. He changed his mind, probably because you leave the GOP, you don't get that sweet, sweet money. But the fact of the matter is that what they're hoping for right now, of course, is that gay marriage has seen a surge of Republicans who agree with it. And you're running into a situation where it's not 2004, as they point out here. 2004 gay marriage was still sufficiently critical among the general electorate that it did help George Bush get reelected. Now that's not the case. Now, in fact, it might actually hurt, because you're going to have these people, and they're not just going to be talking about an amendment for gay marriage. They're going to be talking about guns, their various other positions. They're going to be showing up in ways to drive people nuts. Again, bring up Todd Aiken. You'll have them talking about all kinds of stuff that the Tea Party loves, and it's going to turn off the general voters.
Right. I mean, I'm still waiting for somebody to explain to me how gay marriage harms anybody. I mean, you've got like Brian Brown, president of the National Organization for Marriage, running around saying that such legislation is a frontal assault on religious liberties. Please explain how this is a assault on religious liberties, unless you're claiming that religious liberties means you're in control.
That's pretty much what it is. I mean, we see our religious liberty as our right to maintain society in a way we want and force you to conform to our desires. I mean, again, remember how many of these people have Christian dominionist sympathies, which, basically says we get to run everything according to our strain of Christianity, because they're sure not talking about the Episcopalian Church or the Lutheran Church, or the Anglican Church. They're not even a majority of Christian churches. So
not even close.
Yeah, so they want to define things as this. I have to admit, sometimes I think that they must be some of the most corrupt churches, because, I mean, my little Episcopalian church never had a mega mall built around it. You look at some of these churches and they're these huge castles, and it's just like, well, wait a minute, weren't you supposed to give all you had to the poor? But in this case, yeah, I think the Republican Party is really hoping that they're not going to have another case where a lot of these people are going to be running around in the primaries screaming out threats and demands that, is going to have the Democratic people just rubbing their hands in glee as they just make recordings to play in the general election.
Well, I mean, these people already look pretty bad. I mean, you got like that mega church asshole Creflo Dollar, who is running around telling all of his people he wants a $65 million jet. Okay. What the fuck is wrong with you, Pete? Well, no. The donkey shows are something else.
Yeah. Well, the thing is of course, this is a case, and this is one of the cases of American, religion. It gets into the whole prosperity gospel thing, which is probably the most anti-Christian dogma I can think of. I mean, prosperity gospel, for people who run around talking about how Satan is active in the world, they seem to miss the fact that if there actually was a devil running around, I can't think of anything he'd be more likely to set up and approve than prosperity gospel.
Oh, absolutely.
It is utterly foursquare against everything stated in the Bible. This idea that you are going to somehow be rewarded. I mean, hell, I can think of dozens of parts of the Bible where it says the opposite. If you're a Christian, prepare to have the world crap on your head.
Yeah, give all that you have to the poor, and Yeah, they don't do that. They have no interest in that at all.
And of course, this is another reason why people are beginning to, because, I hate to say it as someone who taught, kids and teenagers are really good about picking up hypocrisy. They're really good about it. And there's a lot of hypocrisy there. But yeah, in the unlikely, knock on wood, chance that the Supreme Court overturns and declares that, gay marriage is not a right, this could also help the Democrats, because I cannot think of anything more likely to whip a large portion of the Democratic, group into a frenzy than the knowledge the Supreme Court just completely, yanked the carpet out from under them. So that's another factor. I mean, for the Republican Party, as long as they can keep the far right under control, it's probably best for them if this gets approved. Because they don't want, let's face it, the last thing you want is a decision going into a presidential election season that causes your opponents just to fly into a rage and do everything they can to get their president in when the time comes to appoint new justices.
Oh yeah, because that's really all a presidency even means anymore is being able to stack the court.
Unfortunately, because there is always so much gridlock in Washington, and there has been for almost the last 20 or so years, really we're in a situation where I think the court is rapidly assuming a duty, not even by choice, but just because, someone at some point's got to make some of these decisions, and they're assuming a lot more duties than they were originally been granted. They were originally seen to have been granted. And that's not going to change till we get a government that's a little less put in loggerheads.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember that the whole purpose of government is supposed to be, although it hasn't been for a very, very, very long time, is it's supposed to be representing the people and doing what is best for the American people. We haven't had that forever. All we have right now are a bunch of people who are out there for money and power and influence, and they'll fuck over the whole country to get personal power and personal money and personal influence. And screw everybody else. They don't care about anybody else. They care about themselves.
Well, of course, and then you got the other problem right now is that if you look at this, and this is one area I would eventually like to see a change, I'm tending towards, I would like to start seeing justices limited to like 125-year or 120-year term of office.
Oh, I'm fine with that. I also want to see justices who are not elected by, or they're not put up by the president or any political party. They come from an entirely independent, separate organization. And I know you got to do a constitutional amendment for this.
Yeah.
We can't ever do a constitutional amendment in this country, but they need to stop being beholden to the parties. That's what screws all this stuff up.
Well, fundamentally the argument is that because they never stand for election again, they're not beholden to the parties. Unfortunately, that just, and this is an area where I'm going to blame the Democrats. Yes, I vote Democratic, people. I consider myself a liberal in many respects, but this is one where the Democrats really need to well up themselves upside of the head, because really the ball started rolling on this with Justice Bork. When Bork was, appointed by the president, that was a case that was highly politicized by his opposition. And it really turned what had been, up until that point, more or less just a vetting of your professional qualifications into these really ugly political slugfests we're seeing today. Because I can think of, there's, if a person in the Supreme Court has issued a paper, and let's face it, anyone on the Supreme Court has written tons of legal papers. They have done a ton of work, because if they hadn't, what the hell are you doing trying to get them into the Supreme Court? But today, any of those papers can be grabbed and used in the Senate during the confirmation hearings against them.
Well, of course, but because it's not about putting respected, valuable, skilled people on the court. It's about putting people in there who are going to vote the way you want them to vote.
Right, because the Supreme Court has in many respects become one of the most powerful de facto bodies in America. I mean, forget a president. A president will be around 8 years at the maximum. If you can get a young Supreme Court justice, and we'll notice that over the last 10 or 15 years there's been a trend towards younger justices for precisely this reason, you can put your imprint, your party's imprint on the court for the next, 30 years. And you get to a position where people look back, like for instance during the Great Depression and Roosevelt's fight with the court at that time, you can get into a position where the court can hold your own policies against both the executive and the legislative branch, and it doesn't matter if they have a majority. Which, is not really what the court was ever intended for.
Yeah, the court was intended to make decisions where the presidency and Congress could not agree, you had this group that said, okay, we are independent of those two, and we are going to make decisions based solely on the Constitution.
We're going to check this law, vet this law. Is this law constitutional? How does it fit in with the other, with the other laws? And, it was ever since, the Marshall Court, the idea that we evaluate these laws in relation to the Constitution. And unfortunately, it's become harder and harder to do that as the court's been sucked increasingly into this political, because, Roe v. Wade is a political fight, for example. And what's happening around it has been political, and you're seeing some of the justices really kind of they've been making some odd contortions to try to reduce that right as much as possible. Whereas, if it was seen just as any other rights case, they would be a lot less friendly to these attempts. But that, unfortunately, right now is politics in America 2015.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not looking like it's going to get any better anytime soon.
No, it's going to be a while. It's like I said, a big thing would be if the Republican Party lost some of the more ideological aspects and became an ideologically neutral small government party. You might see more of a room to more sunlight between the parties. But right now, there's not a lot in some very important ways.
Well, now you got me depressed.
I'm sorry.
So let's go on to the main event where we can be a little bit happier.
With our science, our happy science.
Yes.
This is the main event.
Every once in a while, we have to lighten things up, and this week we thought we'd take a look at one of Japan's lesser-known lunatic cults, Happy Science. Most people have never heard of it, and probably for good reason. It was founded in 1986 by Ryuho Okawa, who claims he can channel the spirits of Muhammad, Buddha, Jesus, and Confucius. It teaches that people must follow a very Buddhist-style fourfold path, but it has a fair amount of Christian prosperity gospel included. They're a very political religion that wants to expand Japan's military, increase nuclear power, and deny historical events like the rape of Nanking. Yep, these people are crazy.
Yeah, and generally if I have Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad and Jesus in my head at the same time, they take me off to, Kellogg Psychiatric. And they wrap me up in a nice white I love me jacket and they try to get the voices out of my head. This is an example of what we have a lot, Hopefully we won't get sued for this, but if you've ever passed a Scientology institution, you've seen our version of Happy Science.
Well, which is actually funny because Happy Science, like Scientology, they were both created when the founders realized that religion could be very popular, and they both have aliens figuring very heavily into their mythology.
Yes, if we look down, for instance, at one of the websites, the Vice article, if you take a look, they've even done anime and manga based on their story. And as Vice points out, there are Wookiees in Star Wars and Na'vi in Avatar. George Lucas and James Cameron have come into contact with creatures from outer space. I wasn't able to find it, and I don't want to post it until I can be certain of its authenticity since this is the internet. But there is an alleged poster out there with all the aliens they have. And it looks like the extra sheet from, I'm not kidding you, Power Rangers, or a list of all the Toei aliens that tried to take over Earth by using Mechagodzilla in the various monster movies.
Yeah, well, don't bring that up because they might incorporate that into their beliefs.
Godzilla could be the anti-Buddha. This is a very strange thing. And I think what it shows, and what I'm going to do here, and hopefully some of my family won't hear it, they'll get very unhappy at me, is what is the difference between this and older religions?
Nothing.
Well, it's new, and we say, well, how the devil could that happen? Because we have video cameras and cameras and tape recorders and all that stuff. Well, of course, one of the big arguments that the religious right has is that nobody saw the Great Flood because we had none of that back then. Of course, it might be a more reasonable comment to say is that you can say there was a Great Flood because no one was around with a video camera to point out, hey, no, this is actually just a really nasty local flood in the Bering Sea. And, because people in this time era are restricted to their legs or riding animals, if everything's flooded for 30 miles around them, they're definitely going to say the whole world is flooded. Because to them, it is. And so really what we see here, we call these things crazy, but in some respects, if you look at some of the stuff in the Old Testament of the Bible, I mean, there is some freaky alien stuff going down there.
Yeah, but the people, the Christians, and this goes for Islam, this goes for everything else, they're never going to acknowledge that the crap that they believe is crazy because they believe it. Just like happy science is never going to say, yeah, the things we believe are completely crazy because they believe it. But they're all pointing their fingers at each other going, you're nuts.
Yeah, and of course one of the questions is that why does anyone believe, I mean, really a lot of this stuff is traditional cultic behavior. And also for happy science, they're cashing into a very unfortunate trend in Japan right now, which is increased nationalism. I mean, one of their stances, promotional videos, they claim North Korea and the People's Republic of China are planning to invade and colonize Japan after nuking it.
Yeah, which after you nuke it, isn't it a little bit too late?
To colonize, yeah. I mean, unless you want to produce giant green rage monsters. This is an unfortunate case where we're seeing increasingly thrusting towards a more right-wing stance in Japan, which of course is causing a lot of their neighbors to get a little nervous. And with honest truth, if you hear about a religion that denies that the rape of Nanking occurred, and you live in China, it's not going to predispose you to be happy about them. The other thing about this is that many Japanese find the happy science a little suspicious because of another one of Japan's new cults called the Supreme Shinkyo. I think they were counts. They were last known for the people who tried to nerve gas the Tokyo subway system.
Yeah, but let's be honest. As crazy as that is, and we point to all these little instances where some religion goes too far. I mean, to be really honest, ISIS is some religion going too far. But this crap happens everywhere.
Oh, yeah. And in a way, it's an interesting question because, Japan is one of the most advanced cultures in the world. I mean, Japan's industry, their technology, you're talking a hugely advanced society, hugely prosperous in many respects, even counting the, their long-running recession they've been experiencing. So what is it that makes people join something like this or go, say, to Scientology? I mean, it doesn't even have the benefit that it's been around forever. What is it that causes people to go to cults like this?
Desperation, being emotionally immature. There's lots of reasons.
Yeah, wanting to belong. And of course, a lot of these, I mean, when you look at these are very professionally produced videos. Professionally produced. They have very smart people working on them to produce the kind of material that will attract people. It's making a fair amount of money.
Oh, it's making a shit ton of money. I'm trying to think, the Olympic trials in Japan, they actually had the people who were practicing, they couldn't even practice because this stupid religion rented out the national arena.
Yeah. And, that is a case of, these religions get a ton of money. I'm not certain how long happy science is going to be around because Master Okawa is, let's be honest, Master Okawa is probably not really concerned about what happens to his movement after he shuffles off and joins Buddha, Confucius, Jesus, and Muhammad, and Yoda.
Yeah.
But, so that's going to be an interesting question. But, most of these religions, they're pyramid schemes. They generate a ton of money for them. I mean, all you have to do is you just got to drive down to, LA and see the Scientology headquarters. And, there is a ton of money in these rackets.
Yeah, but what most people don't realize or don't want to pay attention to is all religions are pyramid schemes. Every damn one of them. I mean, the fucking Vatican is filled with gold. Tell me that's not a pyramid scheme.
Well, what it is it's a situation where you have such a tremendous amount of wealth that goes up. And of course, then we get to the point, well, the church is supposed to give all the money to the people. And
never
doesn't
happens.
Happen. Yeah. I mean, that sometimes happens in the very early stages of a religion, but not too long after that, you suddenly notice that, the abbot is living like a noble off the money being brought from the monks toiling in the field to make, food, and things go down from there. Because, if you take a look at some of the bigger religions in America, like I think Schuler died a while back, but the Crystal Cathedral down in, you remember the Crystal Cathedral?
Yeah, but they sold the Crystal Cathedral to the Catholics years ago.
Oh, they sold it to the Catholics? Oh, okay. Well, it's still the shiny dark tower of Disney in that area. But yeah, I mean, you've got some of these huge cathedrals that must cost millions of dollars to keep up every year. And, it's just a sign that, you know where the money's going, and it usually ain't going to the poor people.
Oh yeah, I mean, in most cases, charitable contributions to religion, the overwhelming majority goes to upkeep the buildings, paying off the staff and the pastors and all the rest of that stuff. And then if they have anything left over, a little bit, they might give to soup kitchens or whatever, things that they run. But let's be really honest, I don't really buy religious charity because the people who are running the soup kitchens, the people who are doing all of this stuff and giving to the poor, what are they really doing? It's not to help the people. It's an outreach conversion unit designed to convince people to join your church.
Yeah, and depending on the church, I mean, there are some churches that are more careful than others in that. There's some churches, well, I don't know if the Unitarians count. Some people say they don't, but like, I know some of the Lutheran churches are very careful that there's no political or religious material allowed when they do stuff, which is good. Then there's other churches where you can't walk in the front door without being hit in the face by it.
Right, and they've always got, and I think that was funny, but like for Happy Science, I was looking at some of the pictures, and everywhere they have books for sale and videos for sale and this for sale and that for sale. That's the whole thing that they want to do, is sell you shit.
Oh yeah. And again, it makes a ton of money for them, because this is a big exploding phenomenon in Japan. I just find it interesting. Like I said, when I saw this, I was like, hey, Scientology, is that you? Because the origins were indeed so similar. It's a religion conjured from whole cloth by a person who was originally, L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. This fellow was involved in investment before he decided to found the cult. And in both cases, they kind of use what they learned to create this new religion, which is rewarding them quite handsomely.
Well, in both cases, they've also set themselves up as the figurehead where they get all the benefits.
The question, of course, is will Happy Science deny Master Okawa is dead as long as Scientology denied L. Ron Hubbard was dead? Because if you remember, Scientology, I think it took the IRS finally getting rather serious with them before they admitted that, yes, our leader has ascended to wherever it was he was supposed to ascend to.
Well, as long as they don't just try to keep his body laying around. What was that story? There was some Hindu or Buddhist group that just could not be convinced that their leader was dead, so he just sat around in a freezer. He's probably still there for years and years and years on end, and they're just claiming, no, he's still fine, he's just meditating.
Right, and I think in some cases that's also to deal with the tax law. And of course, eventually whoever's involved is going to say he may be meditating, but the law says he's got to have a heartbeat. So...
But that's religious discrimination.
Well, remember what the sheriff said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and God is what is God's, and Caesar wants a damn building permit or a death certificate.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop the religious.
No,
crisis.
It doesn't, but what's just, I still find the way these things explode onto the scene just rather impressive. And of course, one of the arguments here is you'll often get, Christian, well, not just Christian, but a lot of apologists arguing, well, these churches, there has to be something behind them because they arise so quickly. Yet here we have a church that is arising quickly and is obviously a scam.
Yeah, but you also have Christianity. You've got a lot of Christian apologists going, wow, Christianity arose so quickly. Not nearly as quickly as this crap.
Right. And so that's one of the factors. That's when you take a look at things like this, is that religions historically, sometimes they take a very long time to develop, other times they arise quickly. And of course, Christianity really didn't arise as quickly as people think it did. I mean, it was a process of decades from its initial split from mainstream Judaism, and it was largely assisted by the fact that the Jews were spread throughout the empire, and the empire had a really nice functioning transit system.
Plus the fact that when you convert the Roman emperor, that kind of has a lot to do with it.
When you convert the Roman, even before then, they were able to move And, one of the funny things is for however many Christian things like to put the Romans in the position of the bad guy, you really have the Roman Empire to thank for the fact that Christianity and Judaism became anything other than just these tiny little sects in the Palestinian area.
Right. But then again, this one, which has been around for 30 years, already says they have 10 million members worldwide. Where did Christianity have 10 million members in the first 30 years? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Of course, granted, back then they didn't have Facebook and the ability to, quickly, spread like this group does. I mean, and they also didn't have Madison Avenue PR firms because again, this is a very slickly done operation here. For all the Vice thing makes fun of it, it's probably designed, like you said, to grab people who are very uncertain about their place in life, probably younger people. Most cults, when I was on campus, there were always various cults coming around trying to get people.
Well, sure, because they're trying to get people who don't know any better.
Right, who don't know any better, who are for the first time away from their support group, may not be fitting in socially as much as they want to. It's, colleges are just lovely, lovely places for everybody from sports club, membership drives to religious cults to go. I mean, when you were at college, they were always there. When I was at college, they were always there. People who are going to college today probably see them.
Oh, they're absolutely out there. They're absolutely out there. Yeah. And they're just as ridiculous today as they were when we were in college many, many, many moons ago.
Yes, many too. And so this is the kind of thing I just thought that this was kind of an interesting, amusing thing to end the segment on because it does sound so weird, but it is so successful. And it's also another look, since a lot of our programs are focused on the United States, I think it's a nice look at, okay, this goes on other places. America is not unique in these kind of things.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish it was. Well, actually, I wish none of these things ever happened anywhere. We're never going to really get anywhere on this planet until we get rid of the scourge of religion.
Well, or at least until we get religion willing to play nice with secular society. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me is that I want religion to play nice with secular society, which means, sorry, you don't get to tell other people what to do. Other people, as long as you don't get in other people's faces, they don't get to tell you what to do, but you have to give up your right to tell them what to do. You have to because really what we're talking about here with the gay marriage thing and everything we talked about last week, and a lot of what this podcast gets into, is the fact that in America there are a substantial number of people who are getting increasingly angry that they can no longer get laws passed to put the sanction of law behind their beliefs. And, that is really the core anger, is that it's not that gays are going to oppress them, it's that they're realizing we can no longer have laws written in Washington and our state capitals to oppress gays.
Right, because that's really what it's all about. Yeah. It's all about power and control and influence.
And not that long ago. I mean, if you look at, gay rights, the Stonewall riots, which was, a riot in, Greenwich Village in Manhattan, that was 1969. So that was 46 years ago, which, by the standards, I was alive, albeit not watching TV at that point, but, by the standards of history, that's not long ago at all when the police could casually go down, beat up a bunch of gays, sling them into jail. You could be arrested for all kinds of things. You could be involuntarily committed. So a lot of the people we're looking at right now who are really opposing gay rights, I think, are looking back on those days and really upset that they can no longer do that.
Oh, sure. That's what pisses them all off. That's what the entire Tea Party, hyper-religious right thing is all about. They want power. They want to be able to tell everybody else what they can think, what they can say, what they can do, what they can believe. And if they can't do that, they're screaming discrimination, entirely ignoring the fact that they're out there trying desperately to discriminate against everybody else.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, and it's one of the things that, again, why they're so upset, that they are losing a power that they never thought they were going to lose.
But that's power that they should never have had in the first place.
No, it's power they never should have had. I mean, it is an utter injustice because none of these people are doing anything to harm them. You know, this is not a case of a behavior that harms anyone else unless that person is actively looking to demand to be harmed, and that's not harm in my book. That's just you being a bigoted SOB.
Yeah, but you gotta remember that as far as these people are concerned, anybody who doesn't buy into whatever it is they believe, hook, line, and sinker, is by definition harming them because their beliefs are all perfect and right and wonderful, and doubt is the enemy.
Right. To use the church lady, you don't think that they're talking about Satan? You know, if you remember, oh God, I think I dated myself. I don't think that skit's been around for decades now. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, anyone listening to this, don't worry about it. I'm just going to go toddle off to my rocking chair and my quilt because I just realized that anyone who's much younger than I am probably had never seen that skit at all.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's on YouTube someplace.
This is true.
YouTube, where things go to die.
You know, if you're interested in what I just talked about, Google the Church Lady on YouTube, and it's Church Lady and Saturday Night Live, and you should hear about it.
That's probably the last time Saturday Night Live was worth watching anyway.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've seen some more recent Saturday Night Lives, and they did not impress. But I don't know if that's because I'm turning into an old fart or because Saturday Night Live's just not that good.
The latter.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens because of these stories this week, one I'm mostly hoping for is that we're going to see in June a 6-3 or better decision saying, hey guys, sorry, time to enter the 21st century. Homosexuals can get married.
Well, wouldn't that be nice?
It would be a birthday present. It'd be Christmas in June for me. Because, you know, we both have friends who are homosexuals who, you know, this is something that directly impacts them. And again, one reason I'm always so, fervent on this issue is our friends who are homosexual. There are people out there who are opposing gay marriage, but who, honest to God, wouldn't mind murdering our friends if they thought they could get away with it.
Yeah, and that's always the thing. You know, it's not religion that keeps these people in check. It's the fact that secular society will not put up with their stupid bullshit.
Right. Officer Friendly will come and take you to jail, and you will spend a very long time in jail if you try to act on this. And, you know, it has not been very long historically, again, why it's so important to go for equal rights, that people actually got off saying, well, I was so terrified when I realized I was near a gay and he might be contagious, I had to beat him to death with a baseball bat. And, you know, again, I think it's been about 20 years since the courts really came down on that type of defense that said, no, that's not a legitimate defense.
Yeah, and it's really too bad we can't pull that one, go, oh no, I mean that hyper-religious Christian idiot over there, I was afraid his stupidity was catching, so I had to beat him to death.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and the thing is that just gets into the fact that these people demand the right to treat other people differently based on things that do not impact them in any physical way. And yet, if you turn around and use that excuse, they would be mortified and very angry that you would dare compare them. But if the shoe fits.
Yeah, beat somebody with it.
Yes. Oh, just as long as it's not one of Imelda Marcos' shoes. But.
Oh yeah, that would really hurt.
Yes.
Alright, so anything else to do for the week?
No, that looks it to me.
Alright, well let's go ahead and wrap it up. Well, there you go. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back again next week. Keep in touch in all the usual ways. Listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM. And make sure you tell everyone that we're here. If you'd like to be on the show, let us know. If you'd like to send us email or a voice comment, the links are at the website. And no matter what you do, please let us know what you think of the show and spread the word. Until next week, take care, and for the happy science crazies, Nanu, Nanu. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bitchspot Report podcast. We invite listeners to interact with the show by commenting on our website at report.jdragononline.com. We can also be found on most social media sites, including Facebook, Google+, Tumblr, and Twitter. You can also listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM, as well as on the aforementioned website. New episodes post every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Those interested in being on the air, please visit our website. All instructions are there. We appreciate our listeners and supporters. We couldn't do this without you.